Nobody told me the first one would feel like paperwork. That was the honest truth of it. My first contact assignment, Senior Sensor Operator, Grade 3, aboard the diplomatic frigate Cresaloon. And what I remember most about the hours before contact was the smell of recycled air, the low hum of the tertiary array, cycling through calibration, and the particular silence of a crew that had done this before, and was therefore not pressed by it. Commander Eve Harlan, our CO, had run 4 prior contact protocols in 7 years. Lieutenant Besson, the comms lead, had run 3. Even our embedded diplomat, Attaché Rael Tondra, carried herself with the flat efficiency of someone returning a library book. The Vithani Accord was a merchant power, not a military one. They traded in rare element derivatives along the outer spiral, operated through a network of broker guilds, and had been filing route passage requests into human administrative channels for the better part of 2 years without anyone ever having looked them in the face. This meeting was the formality that closed the file. That was how Harlan described it in the pre-brief. Close the file. I logged it in my personal notation as routine first contact, Vithani Accord. No threat posture, assessed. I was 29 years old, and I thought I understood what was happening. The Vithani arrived in 3 vessels. A broad-hulled carrier type they used as a mobile guildhouse, flanked by 2 narrow escorts that pinged as lightly armed. Their approach vector was correct, their deceleration clean, their identification signals broadcast on every agreed frequency. By every metric my board could give me, they were cooperative, professional, and entirely uninterested in trouble. They had no reason to expect any. What they did not know, what no alien power in the outer spiral was ever formally told, though the doctrine was not classified, was that the Cresaloon never traveled alone. I knew. Every human crew knew. It was policy so standardized, it had stopped feeling significant. A diplomatic frigate, by standing order, was always accompanied by a cloaked escort. The escort held position within 200 kilometers, matched our velocity, maintained full passive silence, did nothing unless the situation required otherwise. In 4 prior contacts, the Cresaloon's escort had never once been required to do anything. I had checked the escort's last status ping before we moved to contact range. Stealth envelope nominal. Drive signature suppressed, position, holding. The ship was the Ardent Vigil, a purpose-built stealth cruiser, and she was as close to invisible as human engineering could manufacture. Captain was a man named Solus Drev, who I had never met, and whose voice I had heard exactly once on a test channel handshake 4 hours out of port. The Vithani delegation took their time approaching. Their guildmaster, we had been given a phonetic rendering of the title, I will not attempt it here, opened the formal exchange through Attaché Tondra with a layered sequence of trade position declarations. It was genuinely impressive as a performance of careful, practiced strength. They named 6 transit corridors they wanted access to. They cited 12 precedents from non-human treaty frameworks. They offered a rare element derivative contract that our trade analysts had flagged as generous to the point of revealing how badly they wanted the deal. Harlan listened. Tondra took notes. Besson tracked the signal clarity. I watched my board. 37 minutes into the exchange, one of the Vethasi escort vessels deployed a survey probe. Standard guild practice, Tondra had briefed us. They document every meeting site for their commercial records. The probe was small, slow, casting openly on a surveying frequency. I tracked it automatically, noted its vector, logged it. Then I looked at where it was heading and felt something cold move through me. The probe's drift vector was carrying it, slowly and without apparent intent, toward a volume of space that was, to every instrument the Vithani possessed, completely empty. It was not empty. I had the Ardent Vigil's position on my board because I was the sensor operator, and it was my job to know. The probe would reach the edge of her stealth envelope in approximately 4 minutes. Whether it would detect anything when it got there, I could not say with certainty. Stealth technology is not magic. At close enough range with the right probe sensitivity, a return was possible. I flagged it to Harlan on the internal channel, kept my voice flat, told him the probe's vector, the timeline, and the Ardent Vigil's position. He looked at the data for 3 seconds. Then he said quietly, "Pass it to Drev." I passed it. For 90 seconds, nothing changed. The guildmaster was still speaking. Tondra was still noting. The probe was still drifting. Then Captain Drev made his call. I will try to describe what happened on my sensor board, because that is the only record I am qualified to give. One moment there was empty space at bearing 274, range 186 kilometers. Nothing, no mass return, no drive signature, no thermal bloom, nothing. Then there was a ship. Not gradually, not as a slow emergence from cover. One moment, nothing. The next moment, the Ardent Vigil, all 840 meters of her, sitting in open space at point-blank range to the Vithani formation. Running lights off, gun ports open, every active sensor array live and painting the Vithani guild carrier with a kind of precision lock that leaves no ambiguity about intent or capability. She had not moved. She had simply stopped being hidden. The Vithani survey probe registered the return and transmitted it back to the guild carrier. Watched the Vithani sensor signatures on my board shift. A rapid, disorganized cascade of recalibrations and cross-checks that I recognized, even from the outside, as the electronic equivalent of a crew that had just been hit with something they did not have a category for. The guildmaster stopped speaking mid-sentence. On the Cressa Lune, no one said anything. Harlan had his hands flat on the edge of the console. Tandra had stopped writing. Besson was watching his board with the particular stillness of a man who has decided that nothing he does in the next several seconds should be mistaken for a reaction. The Vithani channel was open. We could hear, or rather, I could see on the signal processor, a compressed burst of internal communication between the three Vithani vessels that lasted approximately 2 seconds and contained, by the process's estimation, the informational density of a full tactical briefing. Then silence. 41 seconds of it, I counted. It was not difficult to count, because nothing else was happening. When the guildmaster spoke again, the phonetic character of the transmission had changed. Tandra noticed it before I did. She straightened slightly, and I saw her adjust her translation overlay. She told us afterward that the register had shifted from the guild's formal commercial mode, carries tonal markers indicating parity of standing, to something closer to their administrative protocol. The register used, she said, when a guild member is speaking to a party they have assessed as holding superior position in a negotiation. The guildmaster did not acknowledge the Ardent Vigil directly. Neither did we. The 6 transit corridors became 4. The 12 treaty precedents became a request for human guidance on preferred framework. The rare element contract, already generous, acquired an additional clause. We closed the file in 90 minutes. The Ardent Vigil recloaked before the Vithani departed. By the time their formation began its withdrawal vector, she was gone again. A silence in the dark, patient and still, the way she had always been. I finished my sensor log and sat with it for a while before I submitted it. What I had witnessed was not a battle. No weapon had been fired. No order had been given that a lawyer could have called aggressive. A ship had stopped hiding. That was the entirety of the event. And somehow that was enough to reshape the weight of every word spoken in the hour that followed. I thought about the loop of it. All the prior first contacts, all the careful protocols, the signals broadcast on agreed frequencies, probe trajectories, the formalities. Every one of those meetings had been conducted with humanity's real capabilities sitting quietly out of frame, and the deals made in those meetings had reflected that absence. The Vithani had been negotiating against what they could see. Today they had seen. I do not know if Captain Drev consulted anyone before he made his call, or if he looked at the probe's vector and understood, in the way experienced officers sometimes do, that the moment had arrived. I never asked him. We never spoke directly. But I have thought about it in the years since, and I think the decision was simpler than it appears. A probe was going to find her anyway. The only question was whether humanity would choose the finding or have it chosen for us. Drev chose it, and the Vithani Accord, which had arrived carrying 6 corridors and 12 precedents, and the quiet confidence of a guild that knew how to negotiate from strength, left with 4 corridors and a request for our guidance and a clause they had not planned to offer. Not because they were defeated, because they had finally seen what had always been there. That changes the terms of everything that comes after it.